Okay, everything is being recorded. Good. We can wait another minute or two to see if anybody else comes by, and then we can proceed, because as Jonathan said, we are recording this and it will be available online for generations to come.
To create legends.
Yes, yeah.
And to leave our pathway in history.
Yes, a legacy, they call it legacy.
Yeah.
I will share the screen because we have the title. So, okay. Here we are. Well, I guess we can start slowly, and people will be joining us, hopefully. Good morning, everybody. My name is Nebojša Šaradić, and I'm the first speaker today. Our presentation is the World University's response to COVID-19 remote online language teaching, which is both a project and a collection of studies. So we will be introducing this project today and recommending that you download the studies and have a look at those because they're very interesting. With me as editors of this publication and in this project are, in Zoom order here, Professor Anastasia Tabiekova of the Российский университет Дружбы Народов in Moscow, Professor Josef Schmid of the Chemnitz University in Germany, and Professor Maria Freddi of the University of Pavia in Italy. So again, we are very happy to be here. This is an event that we used to come in person in the past, and we hope we will be able to do so in the future. So I'm the first speaker, so we will be telling you today about the outline of this project, the aims. Then Professor Schmid will be talking about the research questions. Then Professor Tabiekova about participants and findings, and then Professor Freddi will wrap it all up with the conclusion and recommendation where to find the collection of these studies. This is a project outline. The project is looking at the emergency period of language teaching, March to July 2020. We all know what happened back then, and we all know what the feeling was like and what needed to be done. Now, this collection brings together 24 case studies from 35 different contributors who come from 22 universities worldwide, 19 countries, 5 continents. We had 15 independent external reviewers, which means that every case study has been peer-reviewed 3 times. So it was quite a rigorous process. Here are the editors, myself from the University of Cambridge, Professor Tabiekova from Moscow, Professor Freddi from Pavia, and Professor Schmid from Chemnitz. We are all here today, and at the end, we will be more than happy to answer any of your questions. The project was made possible thanks to the financial support from University of Cambridge and the Rudin University in Moscow. Our publisher is researchpublishing.net. We will remind you of this at the end of this introduction. And the collection was published in May this year, May 2021. We had a official launch back then, that was in June, and in the launch we had around 200 people attending from all over the world. These were our partners, or are our partners in this endeavor. You might want to have a look yourself and maybe find a university, your own university, or maybe university from your country. So as we said, We had 19 countries, 5 continents, 22 different universities. So we have colleagues from Asia, Africa, Europe, North, South America, and New Zealand. So this is a peer and externally reviewed collection of case studies. It analyzes the nature of different educational responses to lockdown measures, describes and evaluates the deployment of technology in remote language teaching, discusses methodological issues, and evaluates resources, teacher training, support, as well as student accessibility issues. It also discusses the relevant managerial challenges. These are the aims, proclaimed aims of the project. To document the higher education pedagogical responses to the COVID-19 emergency in 2020, bring together international language teaching professionals around a common pedagogical platform, to encourage active and meaningful global networking, to trace the path to a range of flexible and diverse approaches to language teaching and learning, as well as to sketch a proposal for a new language teaching paradigm. All the studies in this collection have a common structure. We didn't want to press too much, and we wanted the cultural, academic, and other individual background to shine through. On the other hand, we did want some level of comparability. So the level of comparability was achieved by this common structure. So all the studies will begin with giving an institutional, cultural, and academic background, describing the type of course, usual and emergency delivery patterns, describe the technology deployed, teacher training and support given, student and teaching staff feedback that was collected post-teaching, teaching learning outcomes, discussion, lessons learned, limitations, as well as a conclusion and a way forward. So this is the common structure of the studies, all 24. There were, of course, some very interesting intercultural aspects. We spoke already about networking. So in terms of talking to colleagues from other institutions, other cultures, teaching different languages at different levels, my, for instance, experience was that contacting different colleagues, we had three group of colleagues from Arab-speaking countries, one from Cairo, one from Alexandria, and one from Qatar. And these were the only three who asked for a face-to-face online Zoom meeting. Everybody else was happy, apparently, to communicate via email. So I thought, okay, this must be a cultural trait, because these people obviously wanted to see me and talk to me like face-to-face. So that was an interesting experience and very pleasurable meetings that we had. Then, for instance, a university in Iran, Isfahan, they rang all 15,000 students at the beginning of the emergency period, lockdown, in order to apologize, to console them, and offer some guidance while they were at home. So these students were not able to come to university, and the university rang all 15,000 of them. 15,000 phone calls they made. One institution held emergency meeting at highest level and cascaded way forward rules, regulations, and funds. So that is one way of dealing with an emergency situation. So teaching different language in different settings to diverse student population is probably the common denominator of all the studies. And that is what brings such a vast array of richness to this publication. In managerial terms, some of the colleagues involved are junior colleagues, so they teach one course. Some are coordinators of languages, some are directors of whole programs, and some participate at university level policy making. So even there's quite a range of different experiences involved. These are some of the key concepts that we thought, for instance, were worth explaining in our introduction, the editor's introduction to the collection. Key concepts that relate to remote and online language teaching and learning. I will not go into detail now and here, but if you are interested, please go online, download this introduction, and these will be explained in some detail. So concepts like remote, online, blended learning, flipped classroom, hybrid teaching, with special reference that hybrid teaching changed meaning in the last 15 years. What hybrid teaching was in literature 15 years ago is not what we mean today by hybrid teaching. Then we have synchronous and asynchronous teaching. So these are some of the key concepts that you will find in the studies. Which brings me now to the research question, and with great pleasure, I can pass this section to my colleague, Josef Schmid. Josef, questions are all yours.
Thank you very much, Nebusha, for the introduction. And let me emphasize that everyone is encouraged to ask more questions in the chat. We will get back to them. And of course, we can only give you a quick introduction, and we all encourage you to download the book so that you can read some of the details and find out what is appropriate for you, what you can use, and what you can learn from colleagues. So we try to summarize all these different experiences, and the backgrounds were as diverse as Nebusha said, as Europe, Africa, China, Latin America, and universities, public, private. So it is difficult to generalize, but in general, the most important aspects we noticed are included in these research questions here. And we asked our contributors what was the decision-making process like in shifting to remote online teaching, were the challenges implemented in top-down or bottom-up fashion. The result was essentially that usually, of course, things had to be decided top-down. In a few smaller countries, the change was decreed nationwide, in Rwanda, in Africa, for instance. In many cases, the institutional governance was discussed, and the important part, despite that, the language teachers did not feel affected in their academic freedom, and they contributed to the coordinated response, often through subject specific support through their networks and colleagues within the departments, within the university, but also from abroad. In many cases, we have to say, however, that despite the top-down decisions, the technical support was limited on the ground. That is an important aspect, a challenge, but in many cases, the contributors said that they were able to manage. Technology, administration, or pedagogy, which was a driving force for change. In many cases, technology was discussed. It was central in most chapters, and in also very concrete forms, hardware, software, the integration of tools into platforms like Moodle and services. And tools were discussed. No, question number 2. Tools were discussed for various learning formats, including exam, which is still a big problem, I think, not only legally, but also in technology, or the combination of both. Third question we asked was predictability. Responses to the emergency varied depending on the specific contexts. However, is it possible to discern some patterns? Yes, we think there are some patterns, and generally the university community focused on learning as a social practice. many examples demonstrate that the capacity and willingness of teachers and students to collaborate was really, really important, despite technical problems, of course, and initial inconveniences. So despite the successful adaptations, we can also say there was a need for continuous community training and support emphasized in all the contributions. And of course, we think that this is ongoing with changing and we hope improving technologies. Some contributions even discussed in what way remote and face-to-face communication will coexist after the pandemic. That is an interesting pattern, hybrid forms, as Nebusha mentioned already, and as we may discuss again later on. Fourth research question: how have teachers managed to maintain or include interactive elements in their teaching? We all know that this is very important for us and our learners. So it is not surprising that all contributions emphasize problems, because they lost the face-and-face interaction and also the multimodal aspects of cues when the cameras were not switched on, or it was difficult to pick up in important communicative cues, in particular, of course, in intercultural contexts. Thus, many special efforts were necessary to ensure effective student-teacher interaction, and all sides had to get used to it. That is clear. Now, next page. Fifth research question: how learner-centered was the switch to remote online teaching? Again, it is clear a specific challenge, but we think this challenge brought the learner back into focus. It made us aware that learning is much more than dumping material on learners, of course, and the interaction of individual learners and individual learning paths with their teachers were reconsidered. So the challenge was obvious, but the solutions to all sorts of problems were wonderful, we think. And if you look at the details in the book, I think there is something for everyone. How were task-based approaches included in remote online learning? Of course, many tasks were distributed and collected, often on platforms like Moodle, which also made things available in a synchronous mode if it was necessary and convenient for some learners. That is an advantage. Also, the breakout rooms that are available, for instance, I used them in Big Blue Button for my seminars, and they are available, and many teachers, including me, even came to like it because they can be established so quickly. And as I said, they are available in all the platform tools now. And to some extent, some students gave us the feedback that they also liked it. To what extent was the process of learning to remote online teaching able to cater for the diversity of the student body? Yes, that is clearly an important question for us. If you consider the very different backgrounds that we had, for instance, in African or Chinese universities and language centers. But we think that it is quite surprising how many individual solutions were found. Of course, teachers had to ask their students, which type of social media are you used to? And then, okay, they have to say, unfortunately, in my view, we have to use WhatsApp for our teaching from now on. and it worked. We have a nice example from Cameroon in our collection. What methodological developments did we record? Well, there were many developments, and as Nobasha has suggested already, a lot of people are experimenting now with hybrid or blended forms. This is, I think, particularly difficult, and will be something for the future, which we'll look forward to discussing and analyzing, possibly in a second volume in similar style. To sum up, you may say that I may be too optimistic or positive. Yes, I've taught e-learning to all my BA students for over 20 years, but of course, e-learning is not the same as remote learning, and the internet has given us new opportunities, but here it was a necessity. And we also had a research project called Internet Grammar to compare inductive and deductive learning online. So I and all the students that I talked to and all the colleagues whom I discussed this with were maybe a little more prepared than others. But I think, and I hope, that through this challenge, it may also be clear that sometimes we have to go back to basics. We all had to adapt our teaching materials, and we received many more materials from students, from colleagues and former students, of course, in our networks, a nice component in internationalization and cooperation, I think. Thank you so far. Next.
Very well, thank you. Thank you, Joseph. We will give the word now to Professor Atabiekova. Yes, I think we are ready.
Thank you very much. Nubasha, can you hear me?
Yes, we can. We can.
Okay. So to continue with the topics that were highlighted in this collective monograph or in this collection of case studies, of course, we have to acknowledge that technology is in the center of our attention, and it stands in line with our project as it was outlined and planned. What is really important, and to my mind, what indeed might be interesting for our today's audience and for the readers of this collection of cases, it's the point that, yes, each paper focuses on technology, but each paper, each team of authors concentrate on particular contexts. Let it be lecturing, tutoring, providing large group training, very individual consultations, etc. The technology takes a serious part in the investigation, and the research reveals that this awful period of pandemic, lockdown or quarantine, moved and inspired our teaching community to find new ways, new tools, to tailor technology to different subjects, different audiences, different tasks, and different social contexts. Because this period was and still is challenging, not just in terms of teaching process administration, but it is very challenging in terms of social interaction, human interaction. That's why all the authors, and we may state it for sure now in our session, that all the authors are unanimous to say that human factor, teachers, students, administration as a team of humans, they are a priority, and they're driving force for all kinds of changes that aim to maintain the education process, enhance the education opportunities for students, and education tools for teachers. And what is really important, this human role in customizing the technology to different student population, bearing in mind not their educational capacities, but their cultural and social specifics and preferences. Next slide, please, Niposha. Thank you. Then, the overall educational process focused not on just a language teaching, as our research mentioned. It was the process of social interaction, of social collaboration, of cross-cultural collaboration. And it's one of our great advantages during this quarantine, lockdown, and isolation period. Then the next idea that we would like to point out is the consistent work with educational content, its adaptation, the search for tools for the content delivery in line with the students' opportunities concerning their technological capacities, I mean the access to technologies, the cost requirements for the use of technology, and our cases, the overall data reveals that during this pandemic process, teachers spent a lot of time on the adaptation of their teaching materials, and at the same time gained a lot due to delivering the course at a high level of we should say not just the content, but the high level of the opportunities for students' perception of the course. The next point to be mentioned concerns the formative assessment. Of course, the existing due pandemic period context required adaptation of the formative assessment, not just of the educational content. And again, if you look through the book, if you look through different contexts, you will see that despite the affiliation of a particular university, despite of the fact related to the university affiliation to a particular country or content, the issue of formative assessment was mostly related to, again, the adapted through technology course content and to the capacities of the audiences who were the target addressees of this content and of this assessment as well. Then we consider, and the cases that we have looked through, that we have collected, persuade us that this period provided a great experience for a combination of digital and face-to-face modalities, combination of digital and face-to-face pedagogical technologies and tools. And now it's an opportunity to integrate all these sorts of experience and to move forward, to move beyond the traditional boundaries. Next slide, please. Then, what seems interesting, we all experienced in terms of understanding learner-centered approaches. However, as you can read even in the slide, not often this idea was explicitly mentioned through the cases. However, the cases reveal that a lot of group work, a lot of breakout room discussions took place as a form of educational activities through the pandemic period of language teaching and language learning. What is really important, it's the modalities that our research mentioned with regard to the use of the digital breakout room. phenomenon. Then the importance to keep records and to have group discussions recorded for students to look through and for teachers to understand what has been reached and where, unfortunately, sometimes we fail. Next slide, please. Then, of course, our cases reveal that the Earth is focused on task-based learning, and it's ABC practically. It's a central element of learning process in various contexts. And this remote teaching reveals the additional value of such task-based assignments in different contexts, different types of learning, lecturing courses or workshops, etc. Next slide, please. Further, as my colleagues have already mentioned, because Nebojsa mentions this fact and Joseph mentioned as well. So it seems to be very important that the practice of remote teaching we consider through the lenses of different levels of studies, through different classes, and across very different courses in terms of their objectives, from general language and linguistics to language for specific purposes and translation teaching. Next slide, please. Thank you. And this data allows us to say that now we might observe the shift from unintentional blended language teaching to blended by design. So we are more equipped due to this period, and the materials provided in the monographs by our distinguished authors provide a great array of opportunities depending on particular courses, activities, student bodies, etc., etc. The next point is, Nebojsa, if I may ask you the next slide, because we have already talked about Moodle, yeah? Good, thank you. Then the next point that we would like to mention is that generally, we are proud to say that teachers have won this battle to support students during the period of isolation, of lockdown, of quarantine, of closed frontiers, etc., etc. Our profession arose magnificently to this specific challenge, and for sure we can be confident that the academic community of language policymakers, language teachers, of the managerial team can use this experience to stand and to survive in those potential troubles that we might face in the future. So it was a period of discovering new opportunities and discovering new achievements. Thank you. And I give the floor to Professor Maria Fredi.
Thank you, Anastasia. I think really conclude this brief with a question, because we don't want to the presentation with a statement. Basically, the question concerns the fact that we realize that because the way we communicate is changing because of the digital environment and the internet revolution, we perhaps should ask ourselves, should also the way we teach languages change, given that language teaching is teaching of communications skills. So we would like to perhaps just with and hopefully it will inspire some reflections on it. But before we open discussion, perhaps Nebojsa, you can next slide where we have the link to the book. Yes, this was just an example of how communication changed because of the internet. Most job interviews are held online. Again, the question is, would it be perhaps more fitting to teach and practice the language skills directly online in person? So here is the link to the publisher that publish this collection of case studies. And in the next slide, you can click directly on the link. It's open access, Creative Commons license. So these, the various chapters are downloadable for free. You can download the entire collection, or just the chapters that most interest you. As you saw, we really tried to document a very broad range of experiences. So hopefully you will find at least one chapter that resonates with your own experience, and that might stimulate more reflective thinking on your part. I wish if we have the time to click on the permalink. You tell me. I don't know how we are doing with time. We want some time for discussions.
We are not doing great with time. We are 7 minutes over
Late.
time, but let's see if we have
just perhaps to show the table of contents of the book, so that then we open the floor for discussion.
I don't think my computer likes your idea.
Okay, then we go straight to discussion, and perhaps attendees would like to introduce themselves, or
well, let me see if we have.
Yeah.
We don't have any questions as per now in the question and answer section or in the chat.
yeah. I don't know if you want quickly to say where you come from, where do you teach, which university you teach, and whether you have questions on what the future will be and how much will stay of the whole experience, or how much is staying already in this year that is already different from the emergency period that we document. People can use the chat and the Q&A.
They can. In the meantime, we can chat ourselves. My program is still online, whereas most of the universities teaching face-to-face, quite well, they tend to teach face-to-face, but my program being university-wide, we thought it was better to keep it online, because individual departments or colleges can decide tomorrow morning to go online or not to go online, change whatever, because they're all independent. Whereas we cannot, because we're university-wide. If half university decides one thing and the other half decides the other thing, we have to close down. We don't have enough students to run our courses. So, but it's an interesting question. I, for instance, had 2 groups of academic reading Italian students, and to make an experiment, I offered one online and one face-to-face. Okay, can you guess which one worked, which one didn't?
Well, I guess the online was the most successful one.
Yeah, the online was the successful one with, at some point, 12 students enrolled. The other one had 1. So I said, okay, I'm going to close down the face-to-face one and offer them both online. One was full with 16, 17 students, and the other one had 8 or 9. So this with 8 or 9 was the one supposed to be face-to-face. So first session, I asked them, are you here because of the timing, because the other group is full, or because, you know, essentially, would you have enrolled if it were face-to-face? And they were surprised by my question. They looked at least surprised. And they said, yeah. So that's the feedback I got from my little experiment, that actually they didn't mind face-to-face. It was just that, you know, maybe they were late or maybe some other circumstances. So my feeling is that in the future, we will have face-to-face, we will have online, we will have hybrid. But
Yes,
I'm not sure about the percentages. That's what I don't know. I don't know if it's 50-50, if it's 20% way, I don't know.
but it might depend on the course, because even within, for instance, our master course in translation and legal translation, everything that relates to translation training. I mean, discussion of what was translated in the right way, what was translated in the wrong way, because I mean it's legal translation, legal documents, etc., etc. Yeah. So students prefer face-to-face. I do not even say a word about interpreting, because yes, here they prefer to sit in the booth, and virtual booth, it's the things that our students do not like at all. They, of course, we teach them to work through Kudo, for example, through Zoom, but they prefer to be trained in the real booth, etc., etc. But at the same time, for example, we have a number of courses of, I would say it's workshops, it's not lectures, but it's of theoretical nature. I mean, translation studies, legal translation studies, then a mandatory course for Russian universities for master programs, pedagogy in higher education, because the subject gives the right to teach further at any kind of university for each master graduate of the course. So they are ready to work online. They do not see any need to meet face-to-face, to waste time on driving to university, etc., etc. They prefer to communicate from their working places or from home, etc., etc. So I guess we'll just combine, because indeed it was not easy at all, but it was a perfect experience for using these digitalization opportunities for human needs, to tailor digital tools for human needs, for course objectives, for this psychological context, etc., etc. So it's a great opportunity, it's a great experience to my mind, both for teachers and for students.
Nebusha, if you copy paste the permalink on your browser and you want to share it, I'm also copy pasting it in the chat in case you want to go directly, and like this way we could have a look at their table of contents quickly.
Here it is.
Yes, it works.
You want to share the screen with the web page.
If I can open the web page, yes.
I would copy paste it in your browser. Yes. So if you scroll down a little, you get, yes. The table of contents, just to give everybody an idea of the range that we tried to cover. The contents are organized geographically by continent, right? Nebusha, that was the criteria for trying to give some structure to the various chapters. Yes. And of course, also the range of languages is very wide. Of students, populations also already mentioned by colleagues. So I don't know if I don't see any question in the chat.
Well, I think that is self-explanatory. I mean, we would encourage people to go and download the whole publication. It's free. So please do that and have a look for yourself. But this is, as Maria was saying, this is our geographical distribution of the works in this collection. So we are pretty sure you will find something or someone who works in a situation that is similar to yours.
Now, also, I mean, when we started this, it was very important to create a community of teachers across geographical borders who could exchange their views and experiences. Perhaps now after the emergency, there's more communities that started within an institution, within a university. But when we started this, I think it was important to offer support to teachers, even outside the university, because everybody was in lockdown. So it was perhaps difficult to find support within your institution, that kind of support. So I think that was also one of the aims we had. And perhaps things have changed already, because definitely now there's more conversations going on, I think, with individual institutions. Teachers now have the time to think about what happened and exchange their experiences, even within an institution, I guess. And of course, the other thing is, even if that happens, sometimes teachers exchange their experiences with teachers of other subjects than language. Whereas for us, it was this language factor was also the unifying principle, of course, as my colleagues already said.
I'm very saddened to have to tell you that our time is up.
It's over. Okay.
Thank you, everybody. Thank you, Anastasia, Joseph, Maria. Thank you, Jonathan. I hope this will be useful as a presentation and a resource for colleagues. And thank you, everybody, for participating. And well, I will see you, panelists, on the 9th of December, and everybody else hopefully on some other occasion. Thank you all. Bye.
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 Bye.